Los Santos. Sun, skyscrapers, vinewood stars, hustlers. A paradise on the surface, a fantasy sold to the world. But beneath the glossy veneer, it's a city of contradictions. Wealth beside poverty, dreams beside desperation. For every supercar, a stolen sedan. For every mansion, a dozen crumbling apartments. Here, dreams are made and broken. Sirens echo, gunfire pops. Tension simmers in every street. You learn to survive, to sense trouble, to play by the city's unspoken rules. Los Santos devours dreams, money, power, people, yet we stay, drawn by its relentless energy. Because here, anything can happen at any moment. Morning in Los Santos. The city hums to life before sunrise. Freeways fill, trains rattle, garbage trucks grind through alleys. In glass towers, deals are made. In the shadows, hustlers plot their next move. The city's underbelly works as hard as its corporate heart. All of it powered by a single, invisible force: electricity. It lights the skyline, runs the markets, keeps the chaos in check. We flip a switch and the world responds. Until it doesn't. Electricity. The silent partner in every transaction, legal or not. Los Santos runs on a fragile web of wires and power. Traffic lights, servers, water pumps. Everything depends on electricity. It's our greatest strength and our biggest weakness. We never imagine what happens if it all stops. But on May 24th, 2024, as people sipped coffee and checked their phones, a storm from the sun raced toward Earth. An invisible wave, 1,000,000 miles an hour, aimed straight at Los Santos. No one saw it coming. It hit without warning, no sound, no flash. At 11:47 a.m., everything changed. Phones died mid-selfie on Vespucci beach, screens went black, confusion spread. In a private jet, a CEO's deal vanished with the power silence replaced luxury. Subway trains screeched to a halt, plunging passengers into darkness and panic. On the streets, traffic lights failed, collisions followed, chaos erupted. Horns blared, drivers argued, the city's rhythm shattered. The simple logic of red, green, yellow, gone. People didn't understand the system had vanished. Los Santos was plunged into the unknown. Communication was the first to die. Phones became useless bricks. The city's digital heartbeat stopped. At LSPD, dispatchers stared at blank screens. No calls, no maps, no radio, just static. The police were blind and deaf, panic rising. People poured into the streets, searching for answers under a perfect blue sky. Radios offered only static. Rumors and fear filled the void. ATMs froze, credit cards failed, commerce collapsed. Electronic doors trapped people in and out. Los Santos, proud of its tech, was thrown back a century in a heartbeat. The disconnect was total. It felt like the end of the world. After the chaos, silence fell. A silence deeper than the city had ever known. No hum of machines, no traffic, no planes. Just the wind, birds, and distant ocean. People stood, listening, forced to face each other and their fear. The quiet was beautiful, terrifying and unifying. But soon, new sounds crept in. A baby's cry, a bicycle bell, a security gate slamming shut. Then the tinkle of breaking glass, laughter, order giving way to something darker. The silence was over. The city's true nature began to surface. The fuse was lit. Los Santos was a powder keg. The veneer of civilization in Los Santos was always thin. It was a social contract written on paper and enforced by technology. With the technology gone, the contract was suddenly void. The first to realize this were the ones who lived on the fringes, the ones who already saw society's rules as a suggestion, not a command. In the neighborhoods of Strawberry and Rancho, the initial confusion quickly gave way to opportunity. A liquor store on a corner, its electronic doors now unlocked, and its security cameras blind, was an open invitation. The sound of its window shattering was a starting gun. It began with small acts of desperation and greed, people grabbing what they could carry: food, water, alcohol, electronics that were now useless but still held perceived value. It was disorganized, chaotic, every man for himself. But then, the gangs saw their moment. The families, the balas, the vagos. For years, they had been held in check, not just by the police, but by the system itself. A system of surveillance, of bank accounts, of communication. Now the system was gone. They were ghosts, free to move through the city without leaving a digital trace. The gangs were organized. They had their own communication networks, runners on foot and on bicycles. They had their own form of currency, fear and violence. While the rest of the city was stumbling in the dark, they began to move with purpose. They weren't just looting, they were consolidating power. They started by securing their own territory, pushing out rivals and establishing checkpoints. They saw the long game. This wasn't just a riot. This was a power vacuum, and they were the only ones organized enough to fill it. They were no longer just street gangs. They were the new order. The few police officers on patrol found themselves hopelessly outmaneuvered and outnumbered. A pair of cops in a cruiser, their radio dead, would stumble upon a dozen armed gang members taking over an intersection. What could they do? Their sidearms were no match for the automatic weapons being pulled from hidden stashes. They had no backup they could call. They were isolated islands of authority in a rising sea of lawlessness. Some tried to intervene and were quickly, brutally overwhelmed. Others made the pragmatic choice to pull back, to observe, to survive. The thin blue line had not just been stretched, it had snapped. As the sun dipped towards the Pacific, darkness fell over Los Santos. The silence from authorities was deafening. Every person was on their own. In affluent hills, fear was real. Security gates were useless. As evening approached, the true blackout began. Fires were set, some for light, others out of rage. This was the first night the city lost its way. It was ending in primal darkness, ruled by fear. It had knocked out the illusion of order, revealing the jungle beneath. The Los Santos Police Department. We see them every day. The black and whites screaming down the freeway, the helicopters circling overhead. They are a part of the city's scenery, a constant presence, a symbol of authority. We curse them when they give us a ticket. We pray for them to show up when we're in trouble. They are the city's immune system, meant to fight off the infection of crime. But what happens when the immune system itself gets sick? The solar flare hadn't just turned off their lights, it had inflicted a catastrophic system-wide paralysis. The LSPD, the mighty leviathan of law and order, was beached. Inside the Mission Row police station, the air was thick with impotent fury. The dispatch center, normally a hive of activity, was a ghost town of dark screens and silent phones. High-ranking officers, men used to commanding vast resources with a word, were now reduced to shouting down hallways. They tried to organize patrols, to create a plan, but how? Their maps were useless paperweights. Their databases of gang members, criminal records, and city layouts were inaccessible. They were trying to command an army with no way to talk to their soldiers, no intelligence, no strategy. They were flying blind in a hurricane. The officers on the street were even worse off. They were isolated, cut off from command and from each other. A patrol car is not just a car. It's a mobile communications hub. Now, it was just a metal box with wheels. An officer's radio, their lifeline, was just a heavy clip on their belt. They had their sidearms, maybe a shotgun in the trunk, but they were facing a city that was rapidly arming itself. Every corner they turned could lead to an ambush. Every attempt to enforce the law could be their last. They were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. This was the ultimate failure. It wasn't about individual bravery or commitment. The system, the technology they had become so utterly dependent on, had betrayed them. For decades, law enforcement had evolved to rely on data, on surveillance, on instant communication. It was a powerful model, but it had a fatal flaw. They had forgotten how to operate without it. The LSPD was a body whose nervous system had been severed. The muscles were still there, the will was still there, but the connection was gone. The city's guardian was crippled, and the wolves were circling. Into the power vacuum, a new authority emerged. It didn't wear a badge or a uniform, it wore colors. Green for the families, purple for the balas, yellow for the vagos. For years, these gangs had operated in the shadows, a constant but contained threat. Now the shadows had swallowed the whole city, and it was their time to shine. They didn't need a centralized dispatch. Their command structure was simple, brutal, and effective. A territory boss gives an order, and it's carried out. There's no bureaucracy, no paperwork, just action. While the LSPD was struggling to figure out how to talk to itself, the gangs were already moving. They had been planning for a world without rules their entire lives. This was just the final exam. They were the first to understand the new reality. Control the streets, and you control the city. They began setting up roadblocks, not with official-looking barriers, but with stolen cars and burning tires. These checkpoints weren't for safety, they were for control. They were toll booths on the new highways of chaos, and the price of passage was steep. Your car, your valuables, your dignity. Their violence became more brazen, more public. It wasn't just about settling old scores anymore. It was about sending a message to rival gangs and, more importantly, to the ordinary citizens. The message was simple. The police cannot protect you. We are in charge now. Public displays of force became common. A shopkeeper who refused to pay protection money would find his store burned to the ground. Anyone who challenged their authority would be made an example of in the middle of the street. Fear was their greatest weapon, and they wielded it with surgical precision. The gangs weren't just causing chaos, they were creating a new kind of order, a brutal, feudal order. They controlled access to resources. In Grove Street, the families controlled a looted supermarket, doling out food to those who showed loyalty. In Rancho, the Vagos took over a water depot. They were becoming the new government, the new providers. Of course, this service came at a price. Loyalty was demanded, and dissent was not tolerated. Los Santos had traded the flawed democracy of the old world for the efficient tyranny of the new one. The blackout redrew Los Santos. Old divisions became stark borders. It was a tale of two kinds of survival. Up in the hills, the rich were trapped. Isolated, their fear was a quiet dread. High walls advertised their wealth to a hungry city. The police weren't coming. Down in the inner city, it was about finding the next meal. People were used to hardship and banded together. They pooled resources, creating resilient communities. The people who had the least were now the most resourceful. Your true wealth is the community around you. Money died. Billions of digital dollars vanished. Credit cards became useless. ATMs were just heavy boxes. A new economy was born. The new currencies were things you could see, touch, and use. Water, canned food, batteries. It was a chaotic, desperate bazaar. And the gangs were the central bankers, controlling the flow of goods. In the currency of chaos, everything and everyone had a price. As the hours bled into a second day, the city's civility was gone. The initial shock wore off, replaced by desperation. How far would you go to protect your family? The solar flare turned every resident into a contestant on the world's most brutal reality show. We saw it everywhere. People pushed to the edge, discovering a primal instinct for survival. The struggle for information became as desperate as the struggle for food and water. This was the true test, the internal battle between who you were and who you had to become. Los Santos became a city of agonizing choices. The moral greyness that descended upon the city was, for many, even worse. By the second night, Los Santos had changed. It was a city of two sounds. The silence in residential areas, punctuated by distant sounds, making you feel isolated. People stayed inside, listening. The second sound was the roar of the city devouring itself. Fires grew, consuming everything. The sky glowed orange, a beacon of anarchy. The city was divided, silence or fiery chaos. The police retreated, gangs took over, and citizens were refugees. But in the darkness, another force stirred. The silence was about to be broken by the rumble of military engines. Deep beneath the city, a small group of officials huddled in the dark. The mayor, the police chief, and a few city managers were the last remnants of the old government. Calling in the military felt like a humiliating admission of failure. The police chief laid out the grim reality. His officers were scattered, outgunned, and exhausted. They couldn't retake the city. The mayor resisted, worried about the optics, but his arguments rang hollow. The city was already a war zone. Finally, the decision was made. A desperate plea was sent. Los Santos has fallen. We require immediate military assistance. Now all they could do was wait. And Fort Zancudo, a sprawling military base. While Los Santos burned, Fort Zancudo prepared for Operation Urban Shield, secure critical infrastructure, restore civil order. The fort exploded into controlled, purposeful activity. This was the full might of the US military being brought to bear. As the first convoy rolled out, it was a sight to behold. A long green snake of steel and power, rumbling south towards the smoke-stained horizon of the city. The rumble from the north was the sound of a promise, but also the sound of a terrible new chapter about to begin. And Section 3, First Contact, the tip of the spear. The military's initial push into the city was a methodical and overwhelming display of force. They advanced in armored columns. The first point of contact was the Del Perro freeway, with makeshift gang checkpoints. A Rhino tank leading the convoy didn't slow down. It simply pushed a burning bus aside. Soldiers dismounted, moving with a disciplined efficiency. The Vagos broke and ran. The message was clear. The game has changed. News of the military's arrival spread. For some, it was a surge of hope. For the gangs, it was a declaration of war. Section 4, a new kind of war. The military's strategy was to carve the city into manageable zones. They established forward operating bases, or FOBs, at key strategic locations. The Maze Bank Arena, the Vinewood Racetrack, the Los Santos International Airport. These became fortified islands of green in a sea of urban grey. From these bases, patrols pushed out into the surrounding neighborhoods. This was not the open warfare they were trained for. It was a nerve-wracking game of cat and mouse, fought in a labyrinth of alleyways, apartment buildings, and suburban cul-de-sacs. Every window could hide a sniper, every parked car a bomb. The gangs, initially intimidated, quickly adapted their tactics. They knew the city in a way the soldiers never could. They used the maze of back alleys and storm drains to launch hit-and-run attacks. A military patrol would be moving down a main street, and suddenly gunfire would erupt from 3 different directions before melting back into the urban landscape. They couldn't win a direct fight against a tank, but they could bleed the soldiers, harass them, and sow fear. They turned their intimate knowledge of the city's geography into a powerful weapon, making the soldiers feel like an occupying force in a hostile, alien land. The soldiers, in turn, had to adapt. They learned to clear buildings room by room, to distrust open spaces, and to see the city as a 3-dimensional battle space. They relied on their technology, night vision, thermal optics, encrypted short-range radios, which gave them a significant advantage, especially at night. A military helicopter, a Valkyrie, hovering high above a neighborhood, could use its thermal cameras to spot an ambush being set up, relaying the information to the troops on the ground. It became a high-tech game of chess played with live ammunition. The sounds of the city changed once again. The chaotic pops of gang violence were replaced by the disciplined, terrifyingly loud cracks of military-grade rifles. The roar of uncontrolled fires was now joined by the concussive boom of controlled breaches, as soldiers blew open doors of suspected gang hideouts. The fighting was street by street, block by block. It was a brutal, ugly war of attrition. The military was making progress, securing key locations and pushing the gangs back, but it was slow and it was costly. They were retaking Los Santos, but in the process, they were turning it into a battlefield. Section 5, Collateral Damage and Civilian Hearts. Caught in the middle were ordinary citizens, trapped between gangs and the military. For many, the army's arrival wasn't the salvation they'd hoped for. Innocent civilians got caught in the crossfire. Alongside combat, the military began humanitarian missions. Soldiers distributed water, food, and medical supplies. Seeing a soldier give water to a child did more than a dozen firefights. This created mixed emotions: fear, gratitude, resentment, and hope. Stories emerged of bravery from soldiers and civilians, but there were also stories of tragedy. The soldiers weren't a magic wand. Repairing society always leaves new scars. After several days of intense fighting, a new, violent equilibrium began to settle over Los Santos. The map of the city was redrawn once more, this time with clear battle lines. The military had successfully secured a large green zone, encompassing the affluent north, the downtown business district, the airport, and the port. Within this zone, a semblance of order was returning. The fires were being contained by military engineers, and civilian work crews were beginning to emerge under army protection. It was a heavily guarded, tense peace, but it was peace nonetheless. Outside this green zone was the red zone. This was primarily south and east Los Santos, the traditional heartlands of the major gangs. Here, the gangs had been pushed back, but not broken. They had consolidated their forces, retreating into their most defensible territories. Grove Street, Rancho, and the surrounding neighborhoods became heavily fortified gang strongholds. They knew they couldn't defeat the military in the open, so they dug in, preparing for a siege. They turned their own communities into fortresses, daring the army to come in and root them out, knowing it would mean devastating urban warfare. The lines were not just geographical, they were ideological. For the people in the green zone, the soldiers were saviors. They represented the return of order, the promise that life might one day go back to normal. They welcomed the patrols and checkpoints as symbols of safety. For many in the red zone, the military was an invading army. The gangs, for all their brutality, were a known evil. They were from the neighborhood. The soldiers were outsiders, a foreign force occupying their streets. This created a dangerous dynamic, where some civilians actively supported the gangs, providing them with intelligence and shelter. The stage was set for the final, most brutal phase of the conflict. The city was fractured, split into two warring halves. The military's initial shock and awe campaign was over. Now came the hard part, the slow, grinding work of clearing the red zones, block by bloody block. It would be a fight that would test the limits of the soldiers' training and the resilience of the city's spirit. While this ground war raged, another, quieter battle was being fought. In the shadows, a small team of engineers was waging their own war, a war against the broken grid, a race against time to bring the light back to the City of Saints. While the soldiers fought on the streets, another war was being waged. This one was fought not with rifles and tanks, but with wrenches and wiring diagrams. The heroes of this battle wore hard hats and tool belts, not helmets and body armor. They were the engineers and line workers of the Los Santos Department of Water and Power. While the city tore itself apart, this small, dedicated team was tasked with putting it back together. Their mission was monumentally complex, to resurrect the city's entire electrical nervous system from the dead. It was a task that seemed not just daunting, but utterly impossible. Their base of operations was the Palmer-Taylor Power Station, a sprawling industrial complex on the eastern edge of the city. It had become a fortress, heavily guarded by a contingent of military troops. Inside its walls, the surviving engineers worked around the clock. The initial damage assessment was a nightmare. The solar flare's electromagnetic pulse had acted like a massive power surge, frying delicate control systems, melting transformers, and turning sophisticated digital relays into worthless bricks of silicon. It wasn't like flipping a single switch. They had to rebuild the switch, the wiring, and the power plant that fed it. The team was led by a woman named Maria Flores, a senior grid engineer who had worked for the company for 30 years. She was tough, pragmatic, and knew the city's electrical grid like the back of her hand. She saw it not as a mess of wires, but as a living organism that had suffered a catastrophic stroke. Under her command, the teams were organized with military precision. They scavenged for parts, cannibalizing less critical substations to repair the main ones. They pored over old paper blueprints, schematics from a time before everything was stored on a server, now their only guide through the darkness. This was a lonely, thankless fight. There were no cheering crowds, no medals for bravery. Their battlefield was a silent world of humming generators and the smell of ozone. They worked in stifling heat, fueled by stale coffee and a grim sense of duty. They knew that every connection they restored, every circuit they closed, was a blow against the chaos. They were fighting for more than just electricity. They were fighting to bring back the light, to bring back normalcy, to give the city a fighting chance. They were the unsung army, battling the darkness 1 volt at a time. The first major objective was to create a black start. This is the process of restarting a power grid from scratch, without relying on any external power source. It's one of the most difficult procedures an electrical engineer can perform. The team decided to focus on a single, isolated power line, a lifeline they could build upon. Their target was the Pillbox Hill Medical Center, the largest hospital in the city. It was running on failing backup generators, and its supplies were dwindling. Getting power to the hospital was not just a technical goal, it was a powerful symbol of hope. The work was painstaking and dangerous. A crew, escorted by a squad of soldiers, had to physically inspect every inch of the high-voltage line from the power station to the hospital. They climbed utility poles in the eerie silence of the abandoned streets, checking for melted insulators and fused connections. They descended into dark underground vaults, their headlamps cutting through the gloom, testing relays and replacing fried components. Every step of the way, they risked electrocution from residual charges, or ambush from gangs who saw their work as a threat to the new, lawless order they controlled. Back at the station, Maria and her team prepared for the moment of truth. They had managed to get one of the natural gas turbines spinning, a deafening roar in the otherwise silent plant. It generated a raw, unstable power that had to be carefully conditioned and synchronized before it could be sent down the line. The tension in the control room was thicker than the smog outside. One wrong calculation, one faulty component, and the entire system could overload, setting them back days and potentially causing catastrophic damage to their already limited equipment. It was like performing open-heart surgery on a patient who was also on a tightrope. Then, the order was given. With a series of loud, mechanical clunks, the breakers were closed. A surge of power, the first new electricity generated in Los Santos in days, shot down the dedicated line. On a crackling military radio, a voice from the hospital came through, choked with emotion. "We have lights. I repeat, we have lights." A cheer erupted in the control room, a wave of relief and exhaustion. It was just one building in a city of millions. But in the vast, overwhelming darkness, a single light had been lit. It was a start. It was hope. The gangs understood the return of power meant surveillance, electronic locks, and police communication. The work of the electrical crews became a target for sabotage. It was a war fought over transformers and power lines. Snipers targeted insulators, and gangs cut cables. They flooded underground utility vaults. This forced the military to protect the engineers, requiring a dedicated fire team. The most brazen act was an attempt to infiltrate the Palmer-Taylor power station. Their goal was to plant explosives on the main turbine. The attack was thwarted, but the message was clear. They would do anything to keep the city in darkness. The strategy changed. Pushing out from the central power station was too slow. Maria Flores and the military commander devised a new plan: island hopping. The military would secure a key substation, clearing out any gang presence and establishing a fortified perimeter. Only then would the engineering crews move in under heavy guard to begin the dangerous work. The Vespucci substation was a wreck. The crew, weary but resolute, set to work. This became the new rhythm of resurrection, a day of brutal fighting, followed by 2 days of frantic, non-stop engineering. Each success was a monumental victory. But the cost was immense. They were literally rebuilding their city, one long, dark, dangerous mile at a time. After more than a week of this grueling work, a tipping point was reached. The engineers had successfully created a stable power backbone that ran through the military-controlled green zone. They had linked the main power station to several key substations, creating a redundant loop. This meant that if one line was sabotaged, they could reroute power through another, making the grid more resilient. It was, honestly, a major strategic victory in the war against the darkness. For the first time since the solar flare hit, they were on the offensive, not just reacting to damage but actively expanding the light. The focus now shifted to restoring power to residential areas within the green zone. The first neighborhood to be brought back online was in Rockford Hills. One evening, without warning, streetlights flickered and then glowed with a steady, warm light. Inside the homes, refrigerators began to hum. Televisions, if they still worked, lit up with static. It really was a miracle. People cautiously emerged from their homes, blinking in the unfamiliar brightness. They looked at the lit streetlights, then at each other, their faces filled with a cautious, fragile sense of wonder. The silence was finally broken by the familiar sounds of civilization. This moment was more powerful than any military victory. It was tangible proof that the old world was not gone forever. It was proof that order could be restored. News of the Rockford lights spread like a beacon of hope across the entire city, even into the gang-controlled red zones. It demoralized the gangs, showing them that their chaotic reign was temporary, that the forces of order were inexorably advancing. For the citizens trapped in the darkness, it was a promise that their turn would come, a promise that someone was still fighting for them. The job was far from over. Most of the city was still dark, and the most dangerous work of pushing into the gang-held territories still lay ahead. But something fundamental had shifted. The momentum had changed. The engineers, once an unsung army fighting a desperate battle, were now the vanguard of the city's recovery. They had faced down the chaos, battled sabotage, and rebuilt a system from ashes. They had given the city more than just power. They had given it a future. A faint light had appeared at the end of the long, dark tunnel, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it was getting brighter. The return of power was a slow, creeping dawn. Following success in the northern green zones, the military began its push into the red zones. The fighting was ferocious. The battles left deep scars on the urban landscape. As each neighborhood was secured, the sounds of gunfire faded, replaced by the hum of generators. And then, the light would return. For the residents, it was a moment of profound significance. These were the mundane noises of a world that everyone had taken for granted, and now they sounded like the sweetest music. With the power came clean water and the return of communication. The slow dawn revealed the full extent of the damage. The city looked like it had survived a war, because it had. The nightmare was over, but the long, difficult work of waking up and rebuilding had just begun. When the final gang stronghold fell, an eerie quiet descended on Los Santos. The scars were everywhere, etched into the very concrete of the metropolis. But the deeper scars were the ones you couldn't see, the psychological wounds carried by everyone. The memory of the gang's rule, the military occupation, the fear and the hunger. These things could not be erased. Patching the social fabric back together would be a generational task. The old divisions between rich and poor were now deeper and more bitter than ever. Los Santos had lost its innocence. The city was alive, but it was a different city, permanently scarred by the memory of the darkness. Amidst the trauma, a quiet resilience emerged. Los Santos had been brought to its knees, but not broken. A new hustle took over, rebuilding. Neighbors worked together, communities healed, organizing support. The solar flare exposed weaknesses, creating an opportunity to build something better. There was a new appreciation for the unsung heroes. These stories created a new shared identity based on survival, its greatest strength, the resilient spirit of its people. The city was reborn, more real, more honest.